the works for a long time, and we've gotten a lot of interest in this from alumni and our graduating master students who are interested in pursuing their LCSW. So thank you all for being here. My name is Erin Cantrell. I'm the director of the Donito Career Center and Alumni Relations. I'm also joined by my colleague who's going to be on the technical end. It's Terry Torres. She's our career success coordinator, who also has our LMSW. So we'll get started. Wonderful. We will have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for any questions. You can feel free to put those in the chat anytime during the panel, and we'll go through those towards the end. Or you can raise your hand at the end and we'll ask those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to ask everyone if they could briefly share their name, your current role, and how long you've been licensed as an LCSW. So I will pass it on to Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Kelsey Blahnik. I am a licensed clinical social worker and supervisor for the state of Texas and Florida. I moved here from Florida, so I had a little bit of a unique transition into licensure in that I actually originally got my license in Wisconsin, and then I've had mine in Florida, and then I moved here and got reciprocity in Texas. So happy to answer any questions about that. I know that that's a unique thing having to do these transfers and deal with different rules in every state. I guess I graduated in 2012 with my MSW, so I'm not exactly sure of what date that means I got my first license, but it's been 15 years in the field. And I now own a group therapy practice. I mostly, kind of my niche personally is seeing clients with OCD and trauma. And then within our practice, there are 10 therapists, and everybody kind of has their own niche. And the reason why I love working with OCD in particular is my passion is building psychological flexibility. And right now that's playing out in I wrote a book called The And Way, and it's all about how can we build more psychological flexibility so we can navigate conflict around politics with one another. And so through my time working in the private and public sector in the beginning of my career, and then eventually coming into my own practice, I've now gotten into creating CEUs, online courses and presenting, speaking, things like that, and then running a group therapy practice. So that's a little bit about the journey I've taken. I've worked with a lot of different populations over the years, mostly with unhoused veterans at the VA, worked with addiction and medication assisted treatment, inpatient, outpatient, all the things. So I kind of went backwards there, but I've been in a lot of different spaces, and I love social work for that reason because there are so many different routes you can go. And that's why I always recommend when people are debating which type of counseling degree to get. I just think you have so many options, micro, meso, macro, and I love social work.
Thank you, Kelsey. I'll pass it on to Monrovia.
Thank you, Erin. Well, I think just about maybe around today is my 20-year anniversary of starting social work school. So thank you. So it's been 18 years about since I graduated, and then I had to go to the BHEC website to look up when I got my LCSW, and it was 2011. So let's see, I like Kelsey. I have my own private practice, but for a very long time, the only employee was me. Um, but I did become, I mean, if people have questions about private practice, we can get more into the weeds. But anyway, I now have a supervisee who is technically my contract employee. So me and her are the only employees at the private practice. Um, let's see. And then what was the other part of the question? Yeah, so I've been licensed since 2011. I'm self-employed, I'm a supervisor, and some of my passions include long-term psychoanalysis, group psychotherapy, couples work or relationship work. Um, and just, I think just being smart about running a business, that I don't know if things have changed in the last 20 years in social work, but I really didn't get a lot of education about how to run a business or even how to just be smart about graduating with a lot of student loans. So, yeah, that's where I'll leave it for the moment.
Wonderful. Pass it along to Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Ashley Glover. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed chemical dependency counselor. When everyone was saying their years, I'm like, okay, how many years have I had been a social worker? So it's been since 2011. I graduated with my BSW from the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, and I received my master's from Our Lady of the Lake 2016. And then I received my doctorate in 2020 um, at Capella University. I have been a social worker for 14 years, like I said, and the clinical social work part, I started clinical social work back in how many years now? It'll be 2 years, December the 12th, 2023. I would never forget that date. Like, I would never. So I'm going on my second year being a clinical social worker. And I love social work. Social work is so broad. I started off with CPS. Then I currently work at Travis County Health and Human Services. I started off as a caseworker, case manager with disaster, Hurricane Harvey, and things like that. And then I moved into a social work position when I passed my LCMSW 2018. And then my last promotion was a social services manager in 2023. So, and now we're doing the flood with the Leander, people in Leander, the victims. So it has been with basic needs at Travis County with electricity and their basic needs, food pantry, clothing closet, and now I'm doing like the disasters here and there when we have those for the area. So I love social work. Social work is one of my niches, and I just started April of this year to do EAP, like people that's employment assistance program. So I'm contracted through different organizations, and I'm able to do that part time as well, like to have my own practice. So I do at least typically about 3 to 5 a week, plus my full time job. And I also teach. I'm super excited to. I just came on board with UT School of Social Work, so I'll be an adjunct, and hopefully, if it's not this fall, I get a course in the spring. So I'm super excited. Social work is a great field, and it's so broad, and it's needed. We need you guys.
Thank you. David.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful just to hear about backgrounds already. So interesting. I'm David West. I'm with Integral Care and have been interestingly with Integral Care for going on 15 years, which is ever since I graduated UT social work. And so I had a plan at that time to go do to go and do international social work, which is going to be passing through at Integral Care. And then that plan did not, it evolved. And that's really just because I fell in love with public mental health work and stayed with integral care through that process. I've received my clinical supervision as a part of, just a benefit, part of the work that we do. I started out on an ACT team doing community-based mental health work for the first couple of years, and then had an opportunity to lead that team for a couple of years, and then have been over our 4 outpatient adult behavioral health clinics for the past 4 years or so. But yeah, I could go on, but I'll just stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tammy.
I already committed the muted sin. Sorry. Thank you, Erin, is what I was saying whenever you couldn't hear me. I am Tammy Linseisen, and I know a bunch of you, which is so great. And it's so good to see the panelists because I've either heard your name often and a lot, or I know you and haven't seen you in a long time, or I want to know you more, Monrovia. And so these are all things that I was thinking about as we're all sitting here and learning about each other. I've been a social worker. This is year 36, which is wild. And I think the coolest thing about that to me is that I still love it. Like, I feel like, I don't know, the universe was aligned when I picked this career. And I just am so grateful and still feel that way after all these years. And I know a lot of people that don't. I have a lot of clients that don't have that kind of meaning in their world. And so for me, it just makes a huge difference. I teach here at UT. I've been a now a clinical professor here, and I became a clinical professor kicking and screaming because it's a horrible process to get that role, to get that title or whatever. And I didn't care about that title, but they made me do it, so I did it, and it's done. And now I never have to do it again, which is really exciting. But I teach here. I teach first year master's students in the practice courses, and then I also teach an elective of child and adult attachment. My interest in my private practice is in clinical supervision and also in developmental trauma. So I do a lot of work in that area. And then in 2001, as many of you know, the law changed so that every supervisor had to have a 40-hour training, at least every new supervisor. And so I was part of the process that created a 40-hour training in the state of Texas and have been facilitating that or a version of that since 2005. I taught with Alicia Garces for a really long time, and then she left me. I mean, she retired from the course, and in 2015. So I have been teaching it mostly by myself since then, and I really, really love that. I get to teach with I teach with the Army in particular. I used to teach with the Navy as well, and then teach in the community, which is really fun. And I think that's about it about me.
Great. So this will be for all panelists, but what initially motivated you to pursue your clinical licensure beyond your LMSW? And I'll just go whoever volunteers first.
I'd be happy to jump in on that one. So I think, well, I'll just back up a little bit and say my thought was that I was going to do cutting edge clinical work, and I would be in private practice. That was kind of what I thought would happen at some point. That hasn't happened. I think I mentioned earlier, just kind of fell in love with public mental health work, but I also had a need to have that be a sustainable profession, right? And so there is a really significant pay difference associated with having the full LCSW versus an LMSW. And that was something that, as I came into and joined at Integral Care, was very much aware of that. I had quite a bit of student loan debt. I understood that. I was aware of the 10-year public service student loan forgiveness plan that I could, was also very much in touch with fluctuations and whether or not that was going to come to fruition or not when it was a question at times due to, I think generally just due to politics. But ultimately was able to get that student loan forgiveness. That was really very important for me. Thank you. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I remember like, oh, that happened. I can't believe it. And it took, probably closer to 12 years. But I think the two things that were the driving factors in the consideration for me, one for sure was about pay, just because, and that's really not about money for me. It's about sustainability. I don't think in terms of money as much as I do about obligations and the need to be able to pay bills and take care of my family, those kinds of things. The other really has to do with opportunity. And I think there are incredible leadership opportunities with the LCSW, and that having that credential opens up doors. Just that I think, there's so many options. My wife is an LCSW also, and she is a global director working for a tech company providing wellness services, and she oversees like half of the planet Earth for this one company. And it's just extraordinarily interesting work. And before that, she was also doing extraordinarily interesting work, which is like my work. And so the idea that you can do so many different things, it really just opens up a lot of doors to have that LCSW credential.
Thank you, David.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on some of what you were saying, David, and just what everyone's saying about how social work is such a broad degree. You can do policy, I think macro, meso, all that good stuff. But I was a little bit the opposite. Before I went to social work school, I only worked at Planned Parenthood, which is a nonprofit. That was like the only real job I had after college. And I was passionate about working for nonprofits. And then when I graduated from social work school, my first job was at a nonprofit in New York. And I didn't really think about going into private practice, and then I worked at another nonprofit. I moved back to Austin, and just as you get older, I start to think about like, I'd like to have a car that was made in this millennium, you know, I'd like to pay off my, I think when I've talked to other students or people, younger people who are kind of like, I'm just going to die in debt, and I used to have that attitude and just kind of, I know, Ashley, but it's like, then you start thinking, well, you're kind of betting against yourself, and it's like, I'd like to buy a house someday. I'd like to travel, internationally, in addition to meeting the basic obligations, like you were saying, David. So, and just, nonprofits are very hard to run. And if they're not run well, then, I was like, I'm not going to be able to achieve my financial goals if I continue to work at nonprofits forever. So I don't love it that that's the way it is, but I think as I got into my 30s, I just had to come to terms with the way that the world works. And my supervisor was in private practice and was kind of giving back to this agency by supervising me, sort of an in-kind donation, if you will. So by learning under her and seeing what it was like to be in private practice, and then her kind of being like, why don't you just see one or two clients out of my office? I just kind of fell into it. And then again, I don't love that this is the truth, but my income doubled, so.
Yeah. Okay. Just like they have said as well, I think when I'm from Mississippi, you may hear my accent. Um, Being from Mississippi, it was limited resources with job opportunities for social work. So when I came to Texas and especially Austin, I had an LMS. Well, I worked to get my LMSW while working at Travis County Health and Human Services. And I remember seeing we had an old system. It was called CABA. We just changed a year ago. And we could see the previous social workers that worked before us who put the notes in and things like that. And I used to see LBSW. And I'm like, LBSW, that was around 2017, 2018. And then I started seeing LMSW. And I'm like, hold on. If I want to keep a job in the next 10 years with the state, I may need to, or the government, I may need to get an LC. And that's when I start pursuing, because I'm like, maybe over time, I don't want to be limited, because where I'm from is limited, right? With opportunities. So I was like, let me make sure I'm able in 10, 20 more years, I got the highest level I can with licensure in social work. And let me just try it. I don't know if it's going to work, but just trying it. And I'm thankful I did. Like everyone says on the call, financially, my income has doubled. And my clinical supervisor, I got the manager position, social services manager at Travis County, April 2023. And then my clinical supervisor told me, and I was done with my hours, we kept in contact. She said, I don't care what they pay you, how much you get, you worth more. And that was Dr. Ruth Fagan Wiley. She said, whatever they pay you, because sometimes with an LM, we're like, I'm a manager, I make okay. It's like, no. You always work more with that C. It's just a C, you're gonna do it. So that motivated me. And I got it in December 2023, because she kind of nudged me like, I'm great, proud of you, but you all remember you're worth more, whatever they paying you with that C. So yes.
No, these are great. Tammy, you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, I don't think I have anything extra to add to those great stories.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next question. How did you all choose a clinical supervisor, and what made that relationship so successful? Well, Ashley, you covered that, but let's hear from the other panelists.
I'll say I didn't necessarily get to pick who my supervisor was at my agency, but I would love to speak to what I would be looking for now if I had got to make that choice again. And I think when I actually had my BSW supervisor, I chose as my work supervisor. I chose to take a position with her once I graduated, because I appreciated all these, aspects. And I think the main thing that sticks out to me, and something I really try to implement as a supervisor, is I want to be a supervisor who creates this time, this 2 year plus period is meant to be the time that you ask questions you think you should know, or you can make mistakes, and you can be humble and be open to learning. And I wanted a supervisor that really invited that. And I was grateful to have that because it wasn't an expectation you're meant to know everything by the beginning, with your BSW or MSW where I'm still learning. I'm learning every day. But that is really, if there's ever a time, it's school. And then the next time is during your supervision period. It's meant to be a time you know, the idea of no dumb questions. It's just meant to be the time where ask the question that you think you already should know. I'd rather you ask than ask forgiveness later.
When I started, back when there were dinosaurs on the planet, I picked my supervisor by saying, "Hey, we both work in this environment. Would you be willing to supervise me?" Because there weren't like legislative restrictions or anything required. And I was her first supervisee, and she was willing to do that. And she was psychodynamically trained. So I learned just a ton. I learned so much from her. I'm so grateful. And I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do as a supervisor. And in fact, I think is one of the things that led me into doing supervisory training because I was really in a position where I kept thinking, this can't be the way this is supposed to be. There were a lot of boundary violations. There were a lot of her expecting me to be available at night to talk on the phone and cry about some problems that she was having in her life. And I was a baby. I was 23 years old and I came from a military household where if somebody in power says jump, you say yes, sir, and let me ask you how high. And so I didn't know any better for a while, and then I learned that this just can't be the way it's supposed to be. So it was a very interesting dynamic because I learned an amazing amount of material about clients and work with clients and psychodynamically training. It just really, really amazing stuff. And then I saw a lot of really confusing things on the outside, but I've really used that to learn more about what it should look like.
So I'd like to kind of tie that into the next question, which is what types of clinical experiences helped you grow most during your supervision?
I loved when my supervisor, oh, go ahead,
No, no,
Monroe.
no, you go ahead, Kelsey.
I loved when my supervisor shared the things that they were working through with their clients and just like direct real life experiences they were having, and ethical conflicts they were going through, and at the time my clinical supervisor was really passionate about e-therapy, which is very unusual in 2011, 2012 to be passionate about e-therapy already. And she was, sharing a lot about what that experience was like, the pros and cons of that. And so I think I learned so much by not just me going with my cases to her, but also her sharing her experiences with me.
Well, I'll say,
You're
Oh,
good. It's okay.
wait, where did that voice come from? Okay, opposite to Tammy, even though I knew a lot about confidentiality and HIPAA from working at Planned Parenthood for so long, I really didn't know a lot about boundaries. And my supervisor really taught me a lot about boundaries. So that was one good thing. And then the other thing I'll say is just when you go into private practice, especially if you're private pay, which I am, I mean, I have a sliding scale, but still, upper middle class clients for the most part, just working for nonprofits and agencies, and in different environments like schools, inpatient. I was also interned at an ACT team where David, you did some of your work there too. Just again, the variety of clinical presentations that you can see out in the community. You're just, I'm not set up to manage someone with acute psychosis, in private practice, but I'm so grateful that I did see presentations like that, bipolar, just all the big ones in their most acute form, like being inpatient, because ACT teams are kind of attached to inpatient treatment because of course people do become psychotic and do have manic episodes in private practice. But if I had just gone straight into private practice, I don't think I'd know how to use the community to help me as a private practitioner, because I can't do psychoanalysis on someone who is acutely psychotic and not on medication. That's right. Or someone who's in acute substance abuse, right? So anyways, just again, the variety and the community-based aspect.
Yep, I'd like to jump in and add. So I think I really appreciate that Monrovia, the perspective around ACT is kind of, how that provides insight into very high acuity scenarios. And so that was for me, I kind of took a backwards track of it. I became an LCDC first and did that work for a couple of years. So I had some clinical experience, then went back to school for 5 years, which feels like a lot, and got the license and then started on an ACT team. I think the things that stood out to me as most helpful about the clinical supervision really were these real world scenarios. And in this case, I didn't get to choose my supervisor. That was the person who was the program manager of the ACT team. I think that there, are some real considerations there. I've heard over the years and been a part of just many discussions and work groups around the benefits of having a clinical supervisor who is your direct administrative supervisor versus having an external supervisor who has nothing to do with your day-to-day job. I've had both experiences, and I think that there can be real benefits on either side of it. I've heard people with very strong opinions about, I just want to have my clinical supervision be completely separate. And I think that is a very respectable perspective. And I had mostly the experience of my direct administrative supervisor was my, clinical supervisor. I did that for about a year and a half, and then we had some rules changes within integral care, and I had to go to another supervisor as a part of that kind of discussion, actually. So I got to see it from both sides. I think the real world scenarios that would come up and the ability to talk about those things, we would have group supervision. As a part of the ACT model, we'd also staff every client every morning. And so we have 96 clients. There were 10 of us on the team. We all would see all of the clients. And so every day we had about 2 hours of clinical staffing of clients who are just all over in Travis County and in such a wide range of scenarios and circumstances and presentations and a lot of suicidality and parasuicidality and then a lot of just more kind of considered more traditional ACT clients were with a person with schizophrenia who would benefit from a weekly visit. We're just checking in every week or generally more than that, but just such a range. And so seeing all of those scenarios and seeing how my coworkers responded to everything, I can still think back to coworkers from 15 years ago and what they would have thought about how to address each scenario. And there are many different perspectives. So I think some of the considerations for group supervision versus individual, your administrative supervisor versus a completely external party, and those are all things that I think really have to do with they're just different for everyone. So.
I saw Ashley, you had your hand up for a second.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. When it came to outside experience, the experience helped me the most because I was at social services. When I had got my license and taken a test, I just got one kind of sort of experience. I just seen people with basic need and disasters. But going to my outside external clinical supervisor, I was so used to reading a book, right? A books tell you about bipolar or the medications. But when they give me live experience and say their experience, like this, how it made look, it could be shopping, like going to Tangier shopping, that can be part of it. And I'm like, wow, like to integrate those experiences from other outside where her experience come from years of experience, plus what I was facing at work, it helped me. Another thing is too, I know we always say a harm to self or others. It seemed like, okay, a harm to self, do I gotta hurt myself or kill someone? Like, and it's totally different. It can be, when it's time for a license, to be revoked when they get a certain age and things like that. So it definitely helped being on an external because I was so used to reading a book, and the book is a little different than what you see, and it can be similar, but it's a little different sometimes. So bringing those two together, integrating those two was great.
Thank you. So the next question, how do you balance gaining required hours while managing your other life responsibilities?
Well, I have a system. that I utilize and have utilized for a number of years where, and I train on this, but that if you are seeing a client, okay, let me back up. If you're working in an agency full time and you are seeing at least 4 clients, then you qualify for supervision and you can count all 40 of those hours. So that allows you to be able to, go through life working and then just dedicate time for supervision. If you are working in Kelsey's private practice and her group practice, I'm going to use you, Kelsey, because you're here and I know good things about you behind your back. So um, uh, if if you are working in Kelsey's practice and you're seeing, let's say you're seeing 4 clients a week. I don't know if that's allowed, Kelsey, but I'm just going to say it for now. That I would say to you that that equals 8 hours of practice because that is not only the hour that you see them, but it's preparation hour time, it's note writing time, it's maybe some research that you do, it's supervision time that you spend talking about that client or checking in with Kelsey to make sure that this client is the right client for our practice or whatever that might be. So I do it a 2-for-1. And that for me works really, really well because if it has to be 1-to-1, 1 hour of practice, one client hour equals 1 hour, it really does dial it down to taking a whole lot of time to getting your 3,000 hours. So for me, being able to do that has made a big difference for a lot of supervisees so that it doesn't mean that they actually have to see 25 clients a week in order to get their full 40 hours of credit or whatever that might be. So that's one piece. That's not about balancing it with life because life is a whole different animal. But finding ways to make your workplaces work, I think are also really great because you can work in a social work job that isn't therapy, and you can get 4 client hours somewhere in Monrovia's practice, in my practice, whatever, and you can count that full-time social work job towards your hours as well. And that allows for things to accumulate, for the hours to accumulate a lot more quickly so that it doesn't feel, I don't think it feels quite as overwhelming and like, is this ever going to end?
I'll
Yeah.
jump in and oh, sorry, Kelsey. I'll just share that I'm still working on that work-life balance. I think, I'm 45 years old and I'm getting there as I go. But I think trying to find that balance it can be very, very difficult. I generally, I mentioned that I was completing my clinical hours while on an ACT team with integral care. So all of that was pretty contained. We were in a different time back then where there's more just kind of working over. And so it was, I think, difficult. There was a lot of, it was time consuming for sure, but it was all contained in this one kind of, experience. So as I was working through, I was getting credit for the hours in full while I went through that process. And that was, a 2-year process, the normal process, and was able to kind of complete it all on time, so to speak. So, and then from there, it's just the balancing of obligations and personal responsibility outside of work.
Yeah, exactly. It's always something we're working because I don't believe that I'm just going to get to a place where I'm perfectly balanced. I don't even believe in that. And so I actually have a whole course on preventing burnout and sustaining passion. So I'll just pull from that for a moment to share that one of the quotes that always comes up in my mind, and it's not been attributed to anyone in particular. I think there are like a few different versions of this because I've tried finding it. Is that self-care isn't just bubble baths and chocolates. It's finding a life you don't have to escape from. And so I always try to think of in that psychologically flexible way, how can I just create a sustainable career where I'm getting pockets of experiences that are life-giving and I'm still maintaining my passion for the work. And if I can keep that fire alive, then that will allow me to not reach that full extreme of burnout that is so easy to um, get into with social work because of how demanding it can be, especially emotionally. And that could mean like 5 minutes of just stretching in the middle of the day or taking a walk at the best, right after reading the news, always planning for my walk right after reading the news. Or it could be that I just love having my matcha next to me when I'm seeing clients so I can sip on it, like any little version, instead of it needing to be like every time I work X amount of hours, I need to take a full-on vacation. It doesn't have to be quite as extreme. And taking doses like that really helps me keep a sustainable energy and passion for this work.
Thank you. Those are all really great tips. I know because I mean, everyone, yeah, regardless of industry, kind of, I think it's important to think about like self-care and not burning out and just finding where those, those little pockets, like you said. This is going to be a question for everyone, but just like a quick popcorn. How was your supervision structure? Was it individual, group, both, virtual, in person, or both? And how did that structure support or enhance your supervision experience? So just like quick answer, just to get an idea of everyone's experience.
Okay. Mine was individual, in person, and then COVID happened. We had to do it virtually. So it was really great just being in person on that one-on-one time. So I did never get a chance to do it with the group, but she did inform me that I could be with the group, but at that time it was individual, and I loved it.
Mine was individual and in person. But at the nonprofit where I worked, I was an LMSW, but I was supervising our interns from the UT School of Social Work. So sometimes I would bring my interns with me to my supervision, like planned ahead of time, and we would do an article or something like that. So we would have some group supervision, but it was mostly individual in person. But my supervisor was also available for quick phone calls, 10, 15 minutes. And I just appreciated that so much. And that's what I do with my supervisee now. And we text and email and things like that, and I'm careful to be, I'm like, if this is taking up more than, an extra 30 minutes a week, maybe we should schedule a full supervision session, but it hasn't been a problem.
In Florida, it's required to have a specific rotation and balance of individual and group. So that's what we did. And I loved one of the aspects of the individual experience that I did really appreciate is that there is more of an opportunity on that personal level to maybe dive a little deeper into what your role as a therapist is bringing up in you personally. And there's just a little more space for that. And I think that's a really great opportunity since your supervisor is also a clinician, without it becoming actual therapy. And then in the group setting, it's such a benefit because you get to hear maybe the questions that you didn't even think to ask and get to hear all the answers to other people's great questions and experiences and cases that you don't have. I know it's easy to want to pick a supervisor with exactly the niche that you already have, but I think it's such a benefit to be in a group where other practitioners want to work with a different population than you. So you get a multitude of experiences, even if you haven't had them personally.
Yes, I agree.
Yep. Mine was in person, individual and group for the first year and a half. And that was with my direct supervisor and then my social work counterparts on my same team. And then when changes were made internally, I moved to another supervisor who was part of Integral Care, but was a director of Child and Family Services, which is a completely different division. And then I was with a group. And I have to say, I mean, I really loved that as well. I think it really, for me, crystallized this idea of like there are benefits to, having your supervision be a space where you can go and just kind of, breathe a little bit easier and think a little bit more freely. And it's a little bit easier to be vulnerable, I guess is the best way to put it, and to make mistakes or to convey what you don't know. I generally am not trying to run to my boss with, like, hey, I don't know this. It's not the normal thing. So it's a different dynamic, but both were good. But my full experience also was, I think, pre-virtual, and I think I was just getting an iPhone maybe back then. So, yeah.
I had individual supervision when it was the official licensing version. I've had a lot of supervision over the years and a lot of consultation over the years in both individual and group formats, which has been, beneficial for all the reasons that you all have already said. I offer now mostly screen supervision, virtual supervision, not because I mean I have an office that folks could come, but I think traffic in Austin, getting away from work sometimes, just all of those different things made virtual supervision seem to really make sense. I was also a skeptic, just FYI, like I was like, "Ugh, I don't even want to use this Zoom account that two of us are signed up for before 2020 when we were all forced to dig into the virtual world and now we all have our own accounts. But I've been sold. Like I can do very deep psychotherapy and really intense and effective supervision virtually as well. So just throwing that out for today's day and age.
Thank you. Going into like the exam part, what exam preparation strategies work best for you?
I think being consistent. I did 1 hour a night or whenever you can find time daily. But I know when I use, I mean, I'm not getting, it's not a sponsorship, but I use therapy development development center, and it was a little bit costly, but it was well worth it. It's like a few week program, and it helps with preparing you for the exam. And also for free, I used to get on YouTube with RayTube, RAYTUBE, and he breaks it down in a cereal bowl method. What would you do first? What would you do next? And things like that. And that definitely helped because sometimes when we're working everywhere, we will look at our own vision where we're working. But then you got to understand the test is, national, so we have to think about other areas in social work as well. So that helped me.
Well,
I was able to get access to the to a practice LCSW test from the Donito Center, the UT Social Work, and that was super helpful for me. I remember, just studying that consistently, but I think a lot of it for me too was just about getting into the mind frame of the test and trying to practice the test itself. Just what the timing would be, the pacing, and then getting comfortable with my sense, is like a lot of the test is to ensure that you think like a social worker. I think some of the most difficult questions were the ones of like, what would you do first? And part of that is because when taking the test and my thought a lot of times would like, well, I'm going to do all four of these things, and I'm going to do them all kind of continuously within the first couple of minutes of interaction. So it's not like you're not generally stopping and saying, would I do this first or that first? And you're just kind of doing all of it. So those questions can get a little bit sticky. And I learned to think of them as kind of a values question in some way, or, like what is the biggest priority? And to just kind of get into that mind frame of trying to think like a social worker, I think is what the test is testing more than anything else. But practice questions help to get through some of that anxiety and get to a really confident place. By the time you're in the room, you want to be confident and just ready to go through all those questions.
I remember when I started social work school in New York, the version of Erin Cantrell up there, the career services lady, told us at orientation, like, you're never going to know as much about social work as you do when you first graduate. And so I made sure to take my LMSW exam kind of as soon as I could after graduating. And then I moved back down here to Austin. And I also utilized the Donito Center, the practice tests, and that was super helpful. Yes. And what I found tripped me up the most was I had to do really careful reading of the questions. There were just some like tricky, I don't know, like that was the thing that I kept messing up on. I wish I could think of a good example, but just read the questions really, really carefully because I think that's part of what they're trying to test you on. And some of them are kind of value judgments, like you're saying, David. Like I remember there was one question about like if a teenage girl had sort of some, I don't know, some unfortunate thing happening on her face, and the question was like, do you, maybe it was like it was something that would require some kind of surgery. And it was like, do you guide the family to get the surgery? And I was sort of like, help the girl with her self-esteem instead. And, who cares about, and the test was like No, let the girl get the surgery. She's a teenager, you monster. But so anyways, that's just an example of like what your values are versus what the test might think they are.
I think it depends. That's pretty much my answer to almost anything anyway. But I like to talk to the supervisee about what their learning style is, what is best for them. And some people, I think that the topic of social work is so broad that my learning style is taking a class and from somebody who knows what's on the test, because a few people are anointed with that, not me. Taking a class and making it smaller is better for me, but that may not be what's good for them. And so I always send them to Erin. I always send them to the Dignito Center and suggest that they take the test because I feel like that get doing that and finding out where your deficits are or where the areas are that you need to learn a little bit more or be reminded a little bit more are really important. Also, it really just got loud on the fourth floor of the School of Social Work, so I put in headphones. If you saw me wiggling over here trying to find them, I just wanted you to know. Um, so it depends on the learning style of the person. I had a supervisee just take the test. She passed the test, which is great. And she said it really wasn't like the practice test at all, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know which practice test. It might not have been with the Danito Center. It was just a practice test that she took. And she said that she was really surprised that it was so different. There was a lot more memorization kind of stuff, which I haven't heard that in years. So I don't know. Who knows? But for the most part, you're going to do great. You're going to do fine because it's the area you're interested in. When you're interested in more clinical, it's a little bit more focused and it'll give you an opportunity to dig into that. But you're right about that. They were that talking about what do you do first? That's hard. And I could probably debate with half of them about that. But I always think about it's built in the Northeast. So thinking about how the Northeast thinks about social work might be a little bit different. Medical, Monrovia, you nailed it. You almost always do what's medical first, or have a medical exam or a medical eval. And if the kid isn't going to school, you get them back in school. Those are my big tips. I know those aren't very helpful, but they're
Yes, and I want to add a tip to staying in our scope of practice because sometimes we're the only social workers in the clinic or in the hospital or whatever. So staying in our scope, that's going to be helpful too. Just like, hey, remember, I am the social worker in this scenario or whatever come up. I am the clinical social worker, so that helps too. But great tips, you guys.
Yeah, second that. So I'm gonna wrap it up with like because we're running a little bit short on time, and we have the last question of like, what's the one piece of advice you give to someone who's just starting their LCSW journey? I'm gonna limit you to 5 words or less.
Okay. It's not going to last forever. I don't know if it's if you're starting out and getting your hours, it seems like a long journey, but it's not going to last forever. I don't know if that's fine. But
It doesn't have to be exactly 5, but I know if I give you 5, it's gonna keep it short.
You should have told us to write a haiku about it. I would just say, like, don't be in too much of a hurry. I agree with Dr. Glover, but it's also, yeah, don't be in too much of a hurry. It's a great time to learn.
Yes, agreed. I think the thing that stands out to me the most, and it's along those lines, is that once you're finished and you get your that terminal kind of, you got that advanced license and you're done with that, then if you're anything like me, you probably have like 30 or 40 or 50 years of work that you'll do. And so it's not, that's the part I think that nobody really told me my whole life. Like, okay, once you're like really out and you're really done and you're really professional, then there are many years where you're just going to be, doing the work. And so not rushing through it and trying to take it all in and understanding that you're in this kind of sprint type dynamic, but you're going to be like starting the marathon very soon. And that marathon is amazing, right? But you want to take it all in as you go. Sorry, that was way over 5 words.
you're never finished. So you get your LC, and that's great, but the learning is forever and is ongoing. And I learn something new every day. It's one of the reasons I love teaching at the school because the students teach me. And if I don't stay on top of things, they will eat me alive. So I have to stay on top of things to the best of my ability, but they still school me. So I feel like that you're never finished, and that's exciting because I don't know about y'all, but I feel like one of the reasons that I picked the right profession was because I never stopped learning. So, you're never bored.
Yes. Well, mine was basically a combo of what both of you just said, which is build a sustainable career. So if you're not just thinking about how do I get to the mountaintop and then I'm done. It's think about how you're going to keep on sustaining your passion and your career in a way that means you're continuing to learn and that you're not just done and then you got the letters and you're checked out.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been such a like truly beautiful like panel and such diverse experiences. I'm gonna open up the floor to questions. So if anyone either wants to drop it in the chat or if you want to unmute and just ask, um, we can go a little bit past 12 because got started a little bit later, like maybe like 2 or 3 minutes later, but let's see. Oh, we do have one question in the chat. So from Daniel, I'm interested in suggestions on moving from macro practice to a more micro practice after a long 20-year time since having originally obtained my LCSW licensure. If folks are familiar with any local agencies that might know that they might know might work with folks in this type of situation, I'd be very interested. Thanks, Daniel, for that question. Anyone else
Sure.
jump in?
I mean, my supervisee gets a lot of clients through Open Path, which is a sliding scale organization. And I would think that's the kind of thing maybe where you could work for an agency like contracting, like Kelsey's agency or Capital Area Counseling is a popular one.
Oh, I think I heard like the typing.
Yes,
Yeah.
Oh no, he's taking notes. Okay.
Yeah.
I am.
I
Thank
I
you. That's
love
great.
that. Yeah, Monrovia, I love that. Though the open path is there's a great need for therapists for low cost. And in your situation, Daniel, if you were still working for your state agency or for wherever you might be, you could count your 40 hours of social work practice in your hours count. So it wouldn't take you that long to, oh, you already have your LC. Never
I
mind.
have my
Yeah, I
LCS.
forgot. I actually knew that because I supervised Daniel.
Yes, you were my
It's just been a minute. It's been a long time. I mean, you have a very clinical brain, even though you went macro for a long time. So I don't think you'll have any trouble. There are lots of practices that you could join and do part-time. Like, I don't know if Kelsey is open to spaces right now, but I mean, like there are folks who are hiring that, and I have I supervise someone who is in Kelsey's practice for just her portion of the work that she does at Kelsey's place. So
I am actively hiring right now, actually, and that's so great that you said. I didn't even think to bring that up here today, but I haven't posted it yet, but I'm looking right now. So that's great. We're getting so many referrals right now. So I put my contact info in the chat for anybody who is licensed or looking or going through their clinical license.
well, and Kelsey, he does, I promise, have his LC. It's just been a minute. So
I'll just jump in and mention that at Integral Care we have positions that are LPHA positions that they're called LPHA. So you'll see many of those posted, and those are for people who have the full license. And so LCSW would be great, exactly the type of position for that. And then for people with an LMSW, we have QMHP positions, so the qualified mental health professional, designation internally.
Awesome. Are there any other questions?
I had a quick question. So hi, my name is Pamela. I'm a first year student here at the Master of Social Work program, and just like y'all, I want to be an LCSW with my own private practice someday. But my biggest question, as silly as that sounds, I know my empathy is what got me to this point, to where like I grew up like seeing how underserved my community was and other communities around me. But also, I'm like, what if I'm too empathetic for the job? Because it is a heavy field. But yeah, I just want to ask y'all, like, how do you manage your empathy, especially after like maybe like a pretty tough session you have with a client? Like, how do you just like come back to yourselves and like, yeah.
I'll give you like my really condensed version of this that I have a multiple hour course on. My condensed version is I'm always holding change and acceptance within myself at all times. And so I know the change that I can bring on my little microscopic level. And I also have to accept so much that's out of my control. And I know with my client, there's things that I can offer them, and then what they choose to do with it is out of my control. And I know on a personal level, what I can influence and what then my family member chooses to do. So holding that at all times is what moves me through the work and be able to have a boundary of like what I feel for someone and yet don't actually actively have the ability to control because I believe in self-determination.
I think it's lovely. I think over time, we build some emotional calluses. They're that right now they're blisters because it's brand new and it's a lot and it's all hitting us, right? But eventually those spots get calloused. They're still there. We still feel them. I don't ever want us to be hardened where that nothing touches us at all. I think then we need to do something different for a while. But for me, that there's some calluses that have been built that allow me to manage it differently and allow me to hold it differently so that it doesn't just always hit me in the face. And I'm a highly sensitive person. I've always been. I think sensitivity is a superpower. We just have to learn how to wield it. So that would be what I think about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Pamela. Like everyone else said, when I first got in the field, they was like, it's great to be empathetic, but when it goes into sympathetic, make sure that's totally different, right? Empathetic, we're going to put ourselves in their shoes, but sympathetic, where it's too much, where it's overly, where you're sympathizing and your life is being disrupted because of, the work you do, and making sure you find something after work that you enjoy, something that brings you joy, and it'll give you the fuel to go to work and help them and pour into others, but not to the point where it's affecting you.
Can I just say real quick on a practical level, agree with everything that everyone said, but I mean, I have to have a 15-minute break, and that helps me hold my boundaries of ending sessions on time. And I don't know but I've got chocolate, water, bathroom break. And now that I have my stupid Fitbit that tells me to stand up every 15 minutes, I just put on a song from a playlist and I just like move around, like moving my body. I have to move my body, ingest some fuel, whether that's chocolate or water or a piece of fruit, and just kind of, I think moving my body helps me reset, for the next person, just shake it off.
All right, I think we have maybe time for one more question, one quick question. Going once, twice. Well,
I'll
I
just
mean,
add,
oh yes.
since we don't have one more question, I think leaning on your coworkers and talking to all of your people. My solution has been throughout, I mean, from the start to now has been, I just talk about anything that's bothering me. I make myself say it out loud. Not, I find the right time and space for it. But a lot of times that can be with coworkers. And I think that it takes a lot of power out of things when you do that. And I love that example from Tammy of emotional, calluses that we still, I very much am an empathetic person. I think that that's a lot of what got me into this field. And I don't know that, people in my day-to-day interactions would necessarily read that first, right? But that's always right there for me. But appropriately, I have some healthy defense mechanisms that just help me to cope with day-to-day life. And those things are important for all of us. So,
Yeah, and it's okay to have a therapist.
yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I learned as much from my therapist as I did from my supervisor in terms of being a good therapist. Yeah. And I'll say in private practice, you've got to find community. So, like, I'm real active in the Austin Group Psychotherapy Society, and they nurture me, because I'm sure, David, you have a whole office full of people, and I don't have that.
Well, thank you all so much again. This was such a just amazing panel. We will have the recording available probably sometime in the next week or so on our Donito Center career video library. If anyone in the audience would like to follow up and have more questions about our panelists, please feel free to reach out to our office. And we hope to see you at a next workshop or event. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for having